Hi there, it's Nicole Spohr and welcome back to my channel. Today I have day 9 of my Handmade Hearts and Things series for 2021, where I'm sharing 14 Valentine's or love themed projects. Today I have 3 masking Stencils Valentines that are using Simon Says stamp products. So I'm going to be using a couple of the new masking stencils sets, as well as a Gnomes stencil that was released a while ago. It's over a year old, I believe, and then some other fun product. But the great thing about these is they are mostly one layer, meaning they're going to be super easy to put in the mail. I always love a design that looks like it has lots of layers, but it's actually maybe just 1 or 2. We're going to start with the second largest A2 masking stencil, and I'm laying it over a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel of smooth white cardstock to begin, kind of gauging my work area. And then I'm going to take the Gnomes stencil, and it's kind of a Build-A-Gnomes stencil, if you will, and I'm going to very lightly take a pencil and draw in the different components I'm going to use to build the gnome. This is a little bit extra work, but for me it really helps visualize where the gnome is going to go on the card. This first card features just one gnome. So I'm kind of penciling in very lightly his hat and beard, even the nose, which honestly, I don't think you'd have to do. Just getting the hat and beard down is going to show you where the nose goes, and then the body of the gnome. And once I have that down and in place, we want to start stenciling each area of the gnome. I have another video on this. When this stencil set first came out, I did another, I think it was a Christmas themed card. And so I will link to that at the end of this video if you want to see another idea for using this particular stencil. I'm also tracing the different shapes on some masking paper so that I can easily mask off the different components. This is really important for this card as it makes building the gnome a lot easier. Once I have the pieces that I need for this gnome, I'm going to take a sand eraser and erase away the part that I'm stenciling first. So when you are masking, if you're stamping or stenciling, you want to start with the part of the image that's going to be in the forefront. In this case, it is the nose on the gnome. I'm going to lay that in place. I did put some pixie spray on the back of this stencil, which helps it stay in place. And then I'm masking off anything next to it so I don't accidentally over ink the nose into any of those other areas. I'm using Lawn Fawn apricot ink to ink up the nose in a skin tone type of color. And then I will remove the mask. Now the pixie spray does help hold it in place for inking, but I'm going to tell you, I have found that it does leave some residue. Even I don't put it on my cardstock right away, or my paper, whatever I'm stenciling on. I still think it leaves a little bit of sticky residue. It is easy to remove. I will say that. I just take that same sand eraser that I'm using to get rid of my pencil lines, and I go ahead and just erase it away, but I just want to make note of that if you are using it as well. I am going to cut out the nose mask and place it over the nose. And then I accidentally forgot, I tried to use my pencil eraser, which leaves a horrible smudge, but I'm going to take my sand eraser and erase away the beard next. Then we want to take our mask and we want to line up the beard we want to use. There's 3 different beards here. So you have some different options, 3 different hats, the body, and then 3 different like layering pieces for the body part of the gnome, and 2 different nose options. So lots of different pieces here. I am then taking warm gray Copic markers and warm gray 3-in-1, and I am just flicking and feathering in the beard. I always like to add this hair texture to my gnomes, whether they're die cut, stamped, or stenciled. No need to really even do an outline here. I'm just kind of using my stencil to help contain the marker ink in this shape. And then of course the mask on the nose helps as well. I do the dark color first, and then I'm going over it pretty generously with my lighter color. And look at that great beard texture. We'll go ahead and remove the mask again, and we want to mask off the beard now. So I will trim this out with my scissors, place this over the beard, and then we can stencil the body and the hat. Now the reason I need a mask for all of these pieces, all four, is I am going to ink the background with the masking stencil. Masking stencils are a fantastic basic that allow you to instantly create a layer that is one-dimensional, but it can look like more. And I'm going to show you a couple different ideas, as well as how you can use that masking stencil excuse me, not only to add color to your background, because we're going to go all the way around a rectangle shape. There's also some circles, I believe. Simon Says Stamp has circles, rectangles, slimline, and A7 rectangles. So for a 5x7 type card. And they just make creating that layer so fantastic. And I'm going to show how you can take other stencils and do a layer upon a layer. In this case, we have a lot of layers as we have our gnome. Then we're going to have a background and a heart accent, so we have a patterned background. I erased away the body of my gnome. And again, I am using my Post-it tape, or you can use Post-it notes or other type of masking product to mask off any of those areas I don't want to accidentally ink. And we're going to ink up the body or outfit of the gnome with Spun Sugar Distress ink. After we have that, we can do a layering, and I really am partial to these polka dots, and I'm going to use a little candied apple to add a color on top of the spun sugar. We of course are making these definitely Valentine's feeling today. Valentine's or love type cards, so lots of pinks and reds. And what's awesome is, while the focus of this video and tutorial is on masking stencils and stenciling all the things, we're also using the brand new distress ink color called Kitsch Flamingo from Holtz, which is just a perfect addition to all of the gorgeous pinks and reds that Tim has in his collection. And I can't wait to show you how awesome it looks in the background. We're inking up this gnome's hat with candied apple, and I noticed that I have a little bit of over stenciling. That little piece there on that stencil tends to move. I was bummed, but I think I can fix it, so I am not going to start over. As always, I like to show you things you can do to fix mistakes or things that happen. Now, I'm always nervous that the ink on my stencil might transfer, so I did take a minute to take some stamp cleaner and a microfiber cloth and clean away the ink sitting on top of the stencil so it doesn't transfer to my white cardstock pieces in the future. I'm going to go ahead and cut the hat here for my stencil. It is just a tiny bit tricky. I will tell you as well that all of the masks I created here, I'm going to use for all three cards. I will have to create a few additional masks for the other pieces, but I am reusing these until I can't anymore. They eventually will lose some of their stickiness just from sticking on top of the ink. They're just not going to be as sticky near the end, but I made it work so that I wasn't having to constantly remake my masks. Let's take our A2 mask here, and I'm taking that Kitsch Flamingo ink, and we are going to ink up our background, doing an ombre effect of darker to lighter. It is the perfect flamingo ink, and you'll notice that I did kind of try to concentrate the darker towards the top, and especially where I had that over shading from the gnome's hat so that I can blend it out and it's not as noticeable. I noticed I had a little piece of gunk there on my background, so I used some tweezers to pick it up, and then just going back with my ink blending tool to add in a little more color. Now here is my favorite thing to do with a masking stencil, and that's to take another stencil and add a pattern over it. This is the Tiny Spaced Hearts stencil from Simon Says Stamp with Worn Lipstick Distress ink. I really, really love the combination of spun sugar, the new Kitsch Flamingo, worn lipstick, and then any red that you would want. I think these three colors, and really any of your distress ink colors, work fantastic together, but look how beautiful that is when you remove the masks. Now I did notice that I thought the outfit does not show up super great, so I am going to take my mask and I went ahead and put the beard back in place and added just a tiny bit of that candied apple with my ink blending tool around the edges to deepen and darken it, but I didn't re-ink it with the ink pad. I just used the ink that was already on the blender brush. I also went in and fixed a few little areas on the beard that I felt needed a little more blending. There is my first background. Now, something that I like to do is set that aside to dry. With distress inks, they are going to stay wet for a little bit longer, or at least I want to stamp and emboss on top, and that's not going to work very good if the ink's wet. You can definitely speed it up with a heat tool, but my preference whenever possible is to let it air dry. So I'm going to go ahead and work on my other cards. For the next card, I want to use 2 of the gnomes down near the bottom. Now, I messed up, but again, we're going to go with it and make it work. I did kind of lightly draw in my gnomes, and you can see the gnome on the right. I initially meant to use the shorter beard, and I forgot. I got so eager, I guess, and started stenciling that I stenciled the wrong, quote-unquote, wrong beard. There is no right or wrong. I just had originally planned on using a different one. But that is totally fine. I'm going to make it work, and we're going to use kind of all 3, if you will, gnomes on the final card design. I'm going to remove or erase away enough area on both gnomes to add my noses, and I am going to use both the large and small. There's not a huge difference between the two, but a little bit for the gnomes so that we have a couple of different options. That means I will need to create an additional mask for the second gnome. Then I am simply, once I have this, it really is easy to go ahead and erase away most of the rest, but we'll erase away the beards. And for this, I didn't position the gnomes so that they will be completely within my masking stencil. In fact, the first card wasn't either. It went up above the masking stencil. I kind of love this, whether I'm doing a stamped card, a die cut card, or a stenciled card, where maybe it extends above a little bit. So that first card extends above. This one, we're just going to kind of cut off, if you will, the gnomes through the chest area, really like they're framed up in a picture frame. And so I'm going to use my mask to, again, help mask off the bearded area. And this is where I chose the wrong mask. Or wrong beard, pardon me, but that is totally fine. I already have the mask for this one, so it will be easy to use. And I'm just taking warm gray 1 and 3 again and feathering in their beards. Dark first. It always looks so messy, but then when you take that nice lighter color over it and pull that color out and down, it looks fantastic. So I've erased away the hats, and I've got my second mask I have cut out, and I started to cut out the other mask and I was like, oh yeah, I didn't use that one. Oops. So we'll just I'll cut it out because I will need it here in a little bit. I really must have been distracted when I was doing this. But again, it will get used, so it's totally fine. We'll just take that first mask and we're going to lay it over there and then add our hats. So again, a little candied apple for the first one. And it's always best to mask off any of the extra areas because it's so hard with a blender brush or an ink blending tool to keep that color within this small area when you're building something with a builder stencil. And then we'll go ahead and do our second hat. I do want to mention, if you don't want to do an all over design like I'm doing today, you wouldn't necessarily have to do quite as much masking. So say you mask off the nose and then the beard, probably you wouldn't have to mask the hat or the body, and you could very lightly just add ink around the perimeter of your stencil, and that will help frame it up enough that you don't have to add a ton of masking. So originally, I didn't put masks on this one. I thought I could get away with it. I did use the Kitsch Flamingo again for the background, but we're gonna do a tone on tone. So we're gonna keep with the Kitsch Flamingo, and this time take the Hearts Simple Duo stencil. This is a newer stencil from Simon Says Stamp, and stencil a different heart background. I love the tone on tone. As this dries, it just gives a beautiful result, nice subtle background. I'm just making sure and going over the whole thing. Again, I concentrated the darker up at the top. I kind of wish I had done it opposite and done darker down at the bottom and lightened it up at the top for this one just because of where the sentiment goes, but it does work out and I love the end result. We're going to remove our masks now, nice and careful. If there's any fixing that needs to be done, you can definitely do that now. I think I did take this stencil and go back over the noses just to make sure that they are nice and dark. I was really careful because I didn't add any post-it tape. And I think these little guys are so cute, and it just looks like they're framed up. Now, one of the great things about masking stencils is it comes with the frame, but it also comes with the rectangle. So we're going to take the same size rectangle here, and we're actually just going to hold it in place, and I'll have to move it, but I don't want to put pixie spray on the back because I don't want the pixie spray all over my panel. So I'll show you my little trick for this. I'm going to tape it in place down near the bottom, and we're going to use the mask, the rectangle, and then we're going to use the next size up masking stencil to create the red border all the way around. So it gives the illusion of being matted, but it's actually, again, this is all one layer, you guys. I absolutely love this. So you can see I taped it down near the bottom, and then I want to tape my stencil in place, or maybe I just held it. I was living on the edge, being careful, I guess. And we're going to apply our distress ink all the way around. And I worked kind of slow here. And as I get to, I'm going to do all the way around, like the top and the sides. And then I'm going to move the tape to the top and I'll mask the, or pardon me, ink the bottom. I'm adding a little white pin detail to one of the hats just for a little bit of added interest. And I did take the candied apple distress ink and add some polka dots to the lighter pink outfit. Again, being careful not to get that ink on the border since he's supposed to be kind of framed up inside this picture frame. And then we want to let this completely sit and dry as well, which I did. And then I'm going to come back and we're going to do the stamping. So I did my first two A2 size cards first before moving on to the third one. Now comes our sentiments and then a little bit of layering as far as a sentiment strip and some little clay heart embellishments. I'm adding some white highlights to the noses. However, I did go back and add glossy accents to the noses. And then when the glossy accents was dried, I put the white little highlight on top of that. Let's start with our first card background. We're going to stamp I Love You More Each Day along the bottom edge, using the Love Greetings Mix stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. This is a 6x8 stamp set. And then the love notes is going to be the smaller sentiment phrase. So I stamped that along the bottom edge. And for tone on tone, we're using the brand new Kitsch Flamingo Distress Embossing Glaze. I'm really loving the tone on tone. It is a bright, nice pink, which is funny because I was talking about this in a video a couple weeks ago about needing a nice, bright pink embossing powder. And guess what? Here it is in a wonderful distress color. So I love how that looks. I think it's so cute layered on with all of the other inking. And originally I did stamp the You're My Person from the Love Notes stamp set right on the background. But I left this in because I wanted to show you, I think it gets lost in the design. I was kind of trying to keep it all one layer, but I'm a huge fan of sentiment strips. So see how it really runs into the red polka dots of the outfit, and I just don't think it's as prominent as I'd like it to be. I originally left it there. I put glossy accents on the nose, and then I thought, no, I don't like that. So I'm just going to grab a scrap of white cardstock, and I'm going to stamp my phrase on that and die cut it with a little nested banner die that's great for a sentiment strip, or you can use the sentiment labels or any kind of strip die that you have, or you can use a paper trimmer if you want to. And I'm going to just kind of cut that lined up with one side and then flip it around and cut it with the other, if you've seen any of my other videos on creating sentiment strips. And then I'm going to pop it up with foam adhesive right above my stamped and embossed phrase. And I love how that turns out. It's much more visible, much easier to read. We're going to embellish the tip of his gnome hat with a heart, which that probably ended up being one of my favorite things about these cards as far as the embellishing goes, because I thought it was really, really cute and works well with a Valentine's and love themed design, and adding a couple of other little hearts here. This is the Trinity Stamps Crafty Love Heart Sprinkles Mix. I love it because it comes with several different sizes and colors of hearts, and just perfect again for Valentine's or anytime. I love these little heart accents. We can place this panel on a white top fold card base to finish the card design. Let's go ahead now and stencil our final card background, and this is a slimline mask stencil over a slimline background. So I did use a slimline nested rectangle, the largest size from Simon Says Stamp, to die cut my panel, and then I'm taking the largest slimline stencil and I'm going to stencil my gnomes. And for this one, we're going to use all 3 gnomes, and I'm going to have them peeking in from the sides of the stencil. That's why I've laid the stencil down first. Again, help give me a nice guide. I did not bother with drawing these out at all for this card. So if you feel comfortable, you do not have to pencil them in if you can kind of visualize it. I went with hoping this was going to work out. I know, I just thought this is what I wanted to do, and so I just kind of went for it. I'm just going to stencil, mask, color in the beard, mask, and then stencil anything else. And I tried to work kind of slowly. It ended up working out really well because we've got 2 little guys peeking in from the right, and then our last one's going to peek in from the left over near the bottom, leaving us with plenty of room for this long sentiment from the Love Greetings Mix stamp set. It's kind of what I was going for with this design. So now that I have that first guy masked, let's go ahead and I did kind of gently, I guess, draw in the line for that hat just to make sure, but it was very light and not a ton. So here is that beard that I forgot to use earlier. I already have a mask for it. It's all good. And just drawing that in. And then feathering in our lighter color to blend it out. All 3 of the hats are going to be used here. The hats are always so much fun. And I ended up embellishing. So I love that little heart tip. So I did that for both of my first two cards on one of the hats. And then I'm going to add some other hearts, or like around the brim of the gnome hat, on one of them here as well. Fun way to add a little bit of embellishment that isn't over the top. You could also stamp on top of these if you wanted to and wanted to keep it very much a one layer type of design. I think that would be really cute as well. Maybe stamp and emboss even. Adding a little decoration. I will say I kind of wish I would have added some decoration to the gnome that I did first, the top gnome on the right side. I did not, and I think his outfit really blends into the card a lot, which is okay though, because it's more like his head's just peeking into the frame, so I didn't worry about it a lot. But I noticed when I was finished that I kind of had thought he probably needed some decoration for his outfit, but I didn't do it, and it's all good. So we'll add our last nose, and I can just go back and grab that from the first one. And that nose has lost its sticky so badly. In fact, it kept sticking to everything else, and I would lose it. But I'm about finished with my cards, so it'll work out. We're going to blend in our beard for this last one. And then blend out the color with our lighter marker. And then we need to stencil in his body and hat, but we need that mask for his beard. And there, my mask got stuck to something else, so let's put it back. And the hat, this hat, I had a lot of trouble getting it to stick to. After it's been stuck to ink, they often don't want to stay put very well. I was a little bit more careful with the hat. So remember on the first card, that little loop there is so delicate. So I was really, really careful and just more pounced on it instead of rubbing with the blender brush, I guess, if that makes sense. So I didn't get that over inking. And this poor mask, you can see I battled it. It did not want to stay put at all. There we go. Now that our gnomes are masked, taking a little bit of the Kitsch Flamingo ink, and I noticed I forgot to do the outfit, but we'll come back to that in a minute. And we're just going to add that in all over. We're laying that color down all over around the perimeter of our background. And again, I didn't use any pixie spray. I have a love-hate relationship with it. I love it because it holds the stencil down, but if there's any sticky at all, I hate that it sticks to my background. So if I don't have to, I won't use it. Next, I'm going to use the Heart Layers stencils from Simon Says Stamp, and again, do tone on tone. We're using Kitsch Flamingo again to do this tone on tone coloring with the bigger heart all the way down the panel. And I did make it a little darker at the top and lighter down near the bottom, but I love the tone on tone effect. And just lightening up my hand with applying these hearts down near the bottom. Then there's a layer stencil, and we're going to use worn lipstick to add that in. And I removed the masks first. I hadn't initially thought I would use that, but I ended up going ahead and I decided, let's try it out and see what it looks like. I also, about this time, realized I forgot the outfit, so we'll do a little Kitsch Flamingo for this last outfit. Make sure and put the beard back in place, and then we're going to just do some little triangles on top of this with candied apple. And so pretty. But remember, I said I thought I'd try out, so I'm going to take my slimline mask back with worn lipstick and just kind of gently pounce the color in only in the heart. There was a little bit of over inking in a couple places that I just didn't really worry about a whole lot. it didn't bother me enough to go back and completely fix it. I kind of liked the messy look of the background. Now, once this is completely dry, we are going to go ahead and stamp and emboss our sentiments for our final 2 cards. And I also went around and traced some of the areas with Copic markers. So especially where all the hats are overlapping, I felt like the color tended to kind of all blend a little bit too much either together or into the background. And so an easy fix is to very lightly, I went with warm gray 3 first, but I ended up going over it with warm gray 1 to kind of add some definition. I'm also going to add some little stripes around the brim of this one hat, much like I did with one of the hats on the last card design. And then we'll take, once the backgrounds are completely dry, the Love Greetings mix and the Love Notes stamp sets, and we're going to create very similar designs with these. So Happy Valentine's Day for the A2 sized card, and There's Nobody Else I'd Rather Spend Time With for this Slimline card. Again, stamping with clear embossing ink and heat embossing with the Kitsch Flamingo beautiful pink embossing powder for that tone on tone effect. We're going to add our final finishing little touches to these cards with a sentiment strip stamped on smooth white cardstock using the Love Notes stamp set and some Lawn Fawn Lobster Red ink. Die cut those strips with a Simon Says Stamp nested banners die. Now this panel was slightly smaller than the Slimline card base, so I went ahead and adhered it, which is just going to give it a little bit wider border all the way around. We are going to add the little Trinity Stamps Crafty Love heart embellishments on this card as well. We're going to, again, remember I said a minute ago that I went ahead and put some little white hearts around the brim. I played around with the hearts a little bit, trying to figure out what I want to do. And here's a good example of the different sizes you get and colors, sizes and colors you get in this mix. Ultimately, I decided to keep down near the bottom of the card free from any extra hearts. We're just going to do 3 up high, kind of scattered in the background, and we're just going to use our hearts to embellish 2 of the gnome hats down near the bottom. All of the noses on the gnomes were finished with glossy accents. When the glossy accents was completely dry, I did add the white highlight back on top of the nose. When it's dry, you can do that easily, and it really makes that little highlight a lot more visible. For the other A2 card, I used the Happy Valentine's Day sentiment from the Love Greetings stamp set. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this set of masking stencil Valentine's cards featuring Simon Says Stamp stencils and stamps. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here is another video showing how to use that Gnomes stencil for a Christmas themed card. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell to never miss a new card making video. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.